Renault disappeared from the midsize SUV segment for years. During that time, Hyundai, Kia, Tata, Mahindra, and Volkswagen transformed the market. So the question is, has Renault returned with a car that can genuinely compete in 2026, or is the Duster relying on nostalgia? In this review, I'm going to cover the exterior, interior, features, practicality, driving experience, and finally whether it's worth buying. So let's get started. So, starting from the exterior design, I absolutely love the way the new Duster looks. Up front, it has a bold upright nose with huge Duster lettering across the grille. It gives a strong and road presence. It also has a generous approach angle, so if you ever decide to take it off road, you won't have to worry too much. And at front, it gets a reflector based LED headlamps, while the bumper houses LED fog lamps along with the front 4 parking sensors and front parking camera as well. So moving down to the side, you'll notice that it's quite a long car. It has a wheelbase of 2657 mm, which translates to plenty of cabin space and more planted stance on the road. And if I talk about the boot, let's get at the rear because you get this connected LED tail lamps that looks especially good at night. The Duster also gets an electric tailgate, which is genuinely useful feature when your hands are full of luggage and there's virtually no loading lip. So it's much easier to slide heavy suitcases in instead of lifting them. And the boot carrying capacity stands at 518 liters up to the parcel tray. And if you load it to the roof, it expands to around 700 liters. So practicality isn't an issue here, as I mentioned earlier. And if I talk about the cabin comfort and interior design and ergonomics, let's talk about that because I feel like this is the most ergonomically sorted cabin in the segment. Almost everything gets a physical shortcut button, so you are not stuck digging up through the touchscreen menus for basic functions. The infotainment screen itself is tilted slightly towards the driver, and it houses a 10.1-inch display. I mean, that's a small touch, but it makes the whole cabin feel like it was actually designed around the person driving. So, let me show you the 360-degree parking camera because as I maneuver, you can see into this tight parking spot, it's proving it's genuinely handy. Though I do think the resolution and overall image quality could have been a bit sharper. And as you can see, the center console also has a lot of space to keep your everyday stuff. And that's largely down to the compact, easy to use gear selector freeing up the room, along with the parking brake switch being placed conveniently onto the driver's side. Overall, the Renault has got the interior just right for daily driving. Let's talk about the rear seat experience because once you get into the rear seat, you'll notice legroom isn't as generous as some of its rivals. I've adjusted the driver's seat to my driving position, and as you can see, not a lot of space left for my knees, despite the front seats having scooped out backs. Now, that being said, rear seat comfort isn't a deal breaker because for everyday city commuting and occasional highway trips, most passengers should be perfectly comfortable. And if I get behind the wheel, let's get behind the wheel right away because this is where the new Duster gets really interesting. Because the first thing I notice is this longer steering rack. It took 2.5 full turns to lock the wheel from one side to another. That being said, the city maneuvers aren't an issue at all for this car. And while driving, let's talk about the engine and gearbox because this is the biggest highlight of this car. Renault offers two engine options and two gearbox options with the Duster. You can either have the 1.3 liter turbo with a manual or a wet clutch 7-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox. And you can have a 1 liter turbo petrol engine which solely comes with a manual transmission only. So, Renault has kept this 1.3 liter turbo petrol engine impressively affordable because at the price of Rs 16 lakh on road, you can get it the mid-spec variant with a decent amount of sets of features. That means 280 Newton meters of torque and 160 horsepower starting from just Rs 16 lakhs on road. Now that's genuinely great value for money for my liking because for comparison the Europeans and Korean rivals along with the Tata's 1.5 liter turbo petrol will set you back around 20 lakh rupees on road. So credit to Renault for making this robust engine accessible from the mid-spec trim itself. This engine is the one I recommend because the power delivery is smooth and it is paired with a wet clutch dual clutch gearbox. So that gearbox delivers strong performance and Renault says that it is a wet clutch unit. So it is good for Indian bumper to bumper traffic because it shouldn't overheat the way dry clutch gearboxes from the Korean and German manufacturers tend to. While driving this car, you will notice some amount of turbo lag. And that's simply because Renault has fitted a bigger size turbocharger to extract the most out of this small 1.3 liter engine. And the trade off is a bit of lag lower down the rev range. And let me tell you one interesting side note, and that is that this is the same engine block which is also supplied to Daimler for the Mercedes Benz GLA 200. And if I talk about the gearbox itself feels quick and keeps you in right gear most of the time. Though I did notice slightly lackluster throttle response in most of my driving condition. So now let's talk about cabin comfort and interior. Because if I talk about AC performance is genuinely good, and that is helped by the dual zone climate control because that lets both the front occupants set their own temperature. And there's also wireless charging pad with its own dedicated AC vent to keep your phone cool while it charges, which is a really thoughtful touch to have. Overall, the design is really nice. I like this double stitching on the door pads and dashboard. It adds a premium touch along with the carbon fiber style trim up the top. The infotainment system is easy to use and it comes with a built-in Google Maps. So you don't have really need to use wireless and auto or Apple CarPlay. Though you get a 10.1 inch touchscreen with both anyway. What's rare in this segment is that you get to mirror the navigation onto the digital instrument cluster. So you don't have to take your eyes off the road while driving. And the instrument cluster itself looks great. It is crisp, colorful graphics with plenty of useful information. I especially like this eco indicator that lights up between 1000 and 2000 rpm, which lets you know that you are in the engine's most fuel efficient range. And also there's an ambient lighting across the dashboard and front door pads with 30 color options. At night, it lights up the cabin nicely without feeling overdone. And yes, Renault hasn't forgotten what Indian buyers love, and that is large panoramic sunroof. And a small detail that stands out well is two cup holders size perfectly for your morning coffee, and plenty of physical shortcut buttons instead of burying every function into the touchscreen, and a frameless auto dimming mirror inside which looks premium, and it cuts down glare very efficiently. And even on hydraulic starts holding up the bonnet instead of basic support rod. So honestly, Renault has not done any sort of cost cutting with the new Duster, and it's very obvious that cost cutting is hard to find here. And if I talk about the interior design and ergonomics, let's talk about that because I feel like this is the most ergonomically sorted cabin as I mentioned earlier. So I feel this is the perfect car to daily drive it in the city. And that being said, let's talk about the safety and ADAS because the Duster comes with level 2 ADAS. It has an adaptive cruise control, it has blind spot monitoring system, it comes with lane keep assist, lane departure warning, and also autonomous emergency braking. So it's a camera based system and the calibration is genuinely impressed me. It doesn't feel intrusive. This is exactly how a good ADAS system should have behaved. With now that being said, I would recommend that switching it off for city driving because you should save it for the highway, right? Because where the blind spot monitoring on the mirrors is particularly helpful because there's also dedicated physical button to turn off the ADAS, which is becoming rare these days, right? Because look, you also get this automatic headlight with high beam assist along with the front four parking sensors as well. Now let's talk about the city drivability because as you can see I'm taking this car into the narrow street, and because the Duster is genuinely easy to manage in town, you'll occasionally be reminded of its size in really tight parking spots. But overall it's quite manageable in day-to-day driving. And now let's talk about the ride and handling and refinement of this car because on the move the ride quality strikes a nice balance. It soaks up broken roads and speed breakers without any sort of stiff feeling and being too soft as well. Body roll is well contained for a car for this size, and so it feels confident on winding roads too. The cabin insulation, on the other hand, is another strong point because road and wind noise are kept well in check even on the highway speeds. So the conversation inside stay inside without anyone having to raise their voice. Now, Renault is offering the new Duster across multiple variants, so there's a fair bit of choice depending on your budget as well. The base trims gets you the essentials, while stepping up to the mid and top spec variants unlocks bigger features we've spoken about. The sunroof, the 360-degree parking camera, ADAS, 1.3 liter turbo petrol engine. Though prices start at an accessible point for the base variant and climb as you add the bigger engine and equipment, with a well-loaded mid-spec 1.3 liter landing around the on-road price point of rupees 16 lakhs, which we've talked about earlier. So there's a decent spread of colors options as well, including a couple of dual tone choices that suit the Duster's rugged look rather well. Now, let's talk about the mileage and running costs, because as for fuel efficiency, the smaller 1 liter turbo will naturally be more frugal option for most of the driving around the city, because while the 1.3 liter turbo trades a bit of that efficiency for extra power and refinement, especially when paired with a DCT. Either way, the running cost should stay reasonable, because with Renault backing the car with warranty coverage of up to 7 years, long term ownership shouldn't come with nasty surprises with this car. And now let's talk about how this car stacks up against the competition, because where does this car stand with against the rivals? Because cars like Hyundai Creta, Kia Seltos, and Tata's own offering in this segment are strong, well-rounded packages for my liking. But the Duster claws background with a genuinely segment for touches, for example, built-in Google Maps and accessible pricing for a proper 1.3 liter turbo petrol engine and an ADAS system that actually feels well calibrated for our roads rather than being intrusive. If rear seat space is priority, then it's worth cross shopping carefully, because if you are the one driving most of the time, the Duster makes a very strong case for itself. Now let's take a quick recap and talk about pros and cons, because on the plus side, it has got strong interior design, a spacious and practical boot, feature its cabin with a sunroof, ambient lighting, dual zone climate control, and genuinely impressive and well priced 1.3 liter turbo petrol engine, and a smooth wet clutch DCT gearbox, and well calibrated ADAS, and a 7-year long warranty. And if I talk about the downside, the rear seat legroom isn't class leading, and there's some sort of turbo lag on the 1.3 liter engine as well. Though throttle response could have been sharper, the longer steering rack takes a little getting used to. So my conclusion is, to sum it up all, I feel Renault has hit this one out of the park, because the new Duster is almost perfect on every front, with the rear seat space being the one real compromise. Apart from that, it has got features, it has got build quality, a well thought out interior, and everyday practicality. And Renault offering warranty coverage up to 7 years, ownership should be genuinely worry free. Now, special thanks to Mr. Shoaib for lending me this car for the review. I'll be leaving his contact details in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.